So each director that's on, please say aye. Mary Adams?
Aye.
Dave Potter? Dave Potter? Molly Evans?
Aye.
Jeannie Byrne? Aye. So Dave Potter, are you on mute?
Arlene may be controlling him.
We need a quorum of 4 people.
George Riley.
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum. All right, so are we actually doing a Pledge of Allegiance?
Now, I do not see that he is still connected. Let me unmute these.
Director Adams, that's terrific.
Arlene, this is Suresh. I think Director Porter was caller number 3. Would you unmute caller number 3?
You think he was number 3? Oh, I thought he was another caller. Let's see.
I thought he was
Director Potter.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Aye.
So let's have a Pledge of Allegiance. Mary, would you like to lead us?
I would be delighted to. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
for all. Thank you.
Have we heard from Director Edwards yet? All right, so we have additions and corrections to the agenda. Are there any additions? Corrections? Seeing none, can we have a motion?
I have one.
Oh, go ahead.
I would like to pull number 15 or continue number 15 to a future meeting. That's the item on smart water meters. I think we all received an email today. I think that email raises more questions for me than I would be prepared, or that I am not prepared to discuss this item tonight.
Okay.
So I would like to make the motion to continue to the next meeting.
And I will second that.
All those in favor, this is a roll call. Dave, are you calling roll?
Sarah will be calling roll.
All right, Sarah?
Okay. Director Byrne?
Yes.
Director Riley?
Yes.
Director Evans?
Yes.
Director Adams?
Yes.
All right, so motion passes. Oh, sorry.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Aye.
Director Hoffman on?
And Director Edwards?
Director Hoffman is working on getting into the meeting.
All right, and Director Edwards is not here yet. So do we need to move this to a date certain or just a future meeting? Dave? Dave, do we need to move this to a future meeting, a set date, or just to a future meeting?
Disaster.
No response? We'll move it to a future meeting.
What was that?
All right, do we have a motion for the remainder of the agenda?
Move approval.
Favor, please do roll call.
Director Edwards, Director Byrne,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Evans,
Aye.
Okay, just
Director
sent you a link.
Okay, it just showed up.
Yeah, so go down in the email, download the whole email message. There should be a link to the meeting.
There's.
Could we continue, please? Yes.
Director Potter,
Aye.
okay, approval of the consent calendar.
I believe we have,
5-0 with
excuse
have-
me,
Hoffman absent.
Do we have oral communications?
we
Is
have
there-
overview of the teleconference protocol.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's okay. Chair, Vice Chair, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
We just want to review the protocol for the meeting. To please mute your microphone or your phone. If you're calling in and watching on your computer, please turn off your speakers to prevent the screeching feedback. The chair or the vice chair has called the meeting to order. We'll have oral communications. The chair will ask for comments from the public on items not on the agenda. Or items on the consent calendar, informational items. And public comment will be requested for each public hearing and action item. If participating by computer, use the raised hand function to indicate you have a comment. When called on, unmute your microphone, identify yourself, and begin speaking. When finished, mute your mic. If participating by phone, after comments by computer participants are received, the host will ask for phone-in comments. Unmute your phone and identify yourself. The host will note the names of those that wish to speak and will call upon you when it's your turn. While waiting, please mute your phone. Action and discussion items, the board will receive a presentation from staff and ask questions for public comment on the item. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. So we will now move to communications. Anyone wishing to address the board on items that are not on the agenda? On the consent agenda? Anyone wishing to speak?
Okay. Vice Chair Byrne, I see no raised hands as yet. We can wait a moment and then ask if there are any that want to participate by phone.
And you receive those communications, do you?
Yes, we will unmute. Yes, we will unmute everyone, and then the persons who would like to make a comment who are not raising their hands can
We're getting two
say
messages.
their name.
Excuse me, Arlene?
Yes.
I'm noticing in the chat function that several people have indicated that they cannot find or do not see a raised hands icon. Could you explain where that could be found?
That should be, it should be shown next to your name on the participants list. If you do not see it, is there someone else here who can respond to that question? Another staff person possibly? You can.
Arlene, this is Dave Laredo. I do not see a raised hands icon.
Okay.
I see one next to my name, but nobody else's.
Here, this is Heidi
You
says.
need to kind of hold your cursor over your name and should pop up.
So it's now asking me for the meeting password, so I'm gonna put the meeting password back in the same one, right?
Oh, that's a shame that the link didn't take you directly to it.
Would you go on mute, please?
This is Suresh. If you are not seeing your hand signal, when you hover your mouse over your name, we do have the provision where basically Arlene will unmute everyone to ask questions. So if you are not able to raise your hand, you will still get the opportunity to ask questions when Arlene unmutes everybody.
Yeah, I do not have raised hands on mine either.
Okay. Sarah, can you unmute them? Unmute everyone.
On my end.
I see Anna Thompson has raised her hand.
I'm not sure who's speaking.
Miss Thompson, did you want to make a comment?
No, I clicked on the hand by mistake.
Thank you.
So I don't know how to bring it down now.
I think if you just click on it again, it will go.
I tried, but it doesn't. Oh yeah, it did now. Thank you.
So if you move your cursor to the right of your name, the raised hand icon should come up.
Arlene, I did find it on mine, and I would just like to ask everybody to mute, please.
All right, so we have no oral communications.
Okay. A couple of things. Director Edwards and Director Potter had joined by phone, so if we're muting the phone callers, we've muted the two directors.
All right.
Director Hoffman has been trying to connect, and one of my staff thinks he may be connected twice, but I think his look and feel at home is that he hasn't connected once.
Is the speaker somebody's background, or who is speaking?
This is caller number 13. Can we mute caller number 13, please?
Okay, so I turn the meeting over to Chair Edwards.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
I think just to get you up to speed, there were no oral communications.
That's nice.
Mr. Edwards, this is Dave Laredo. I note that on chat, there are a number of people who say that they do not know how to raise their hand to be recognized. And I don't know that we have a solution for that.
Okay.
Suggest that they text or email. Suggest that they text or email their question.
Somebody cutting in and out.
I'd like to make a suggestion. Where I found it was in the list of participants, which happens to be on the right-hand side of my screen. I have all the way to the right side. If you hover over your name, you do see a raise hand, a turn on video, and a mute your microphone. Those are the three icons on the far right side of the line to the right of your name.
So I see you, Dave.
That's a start. Then you should be able to go to a participant view. Well, do you see the general manager's report?
Yes.
You're in. Now it's just a matter of getting your look and feel to work for you.
George, with a question. Did we approve the consent calendar?
Yep.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Thank you.
I'm seeing George. How does this work, Dave? Is it when somebody talks, the picture shows up?
Dave, you're on mute.
Yeah, I apologize. We've got Director Hoffman in. I have to give my report.
So for me to
If someone, I believe the participants could unmute themselves and then state their name when we call for public comment.
We need to back up to the consent agenda.
Hey, do anyone want anything pulled from the consent agenda?
It shows that you're muted.
Gary, I think
your logins.
you're like one step
Not
away from
muted on
joining
the
the meeting is what I'm getting the impression, because I don't see you on the participants, but you're seeing the meeting.
Yeah, I'm seeing, the stuff on the screen, and at the top of the screen, I'm seeing all the participants.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
So then if you go into, do you see any WebEx controls, like when you run your cursor?
Yeah, at the bottom, there's a microphone, a camera.
Yeah, so what color is the camera right now?
Gray.
Gray. Oh, that's weird. It's either black or red.
Well, no, unless he doesn't have a camera on his computer. I don't have camera on my computer. Dave, you're on mute.
That'll help.
Yeah, click on the microphone as well. I have to hop off. Gary.
Okay.
We can get back on later.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Yep, good luck.
I can try unmuting everyone. So
I see the frustration, Dave.
So
no. So I apologize for not following along very well, but I did see we were close to the general manager's report.
No, we were back on consent.
And we went back, okay.
To approve the consent agenda.
George here. I'd like to move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
This is Director Evans. I would like to pull items 2 and 3 for discussion.
Okay, Director Evans pulled 2 and 3 for discussion.
And I will make a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda.
Second.
And we have a first and second by Director Evans and Director Riley. All in favor say aye. No, roll call vote. All in favor. Roll call vote.
Director Edwards?
Yes.
You got it. Exclamation point.
Director Byrne?
Yes.
Director Riley?
Yes.
Director Evans?
Yes.
Director Hoffman?
Oh, man.
Director Adams?
Yes.
Director Potter?
Aye.
Okay.
Consent calendar 6-0 with Hoffman absent.
All right, 6-0. Director Evans, number 2, what's your question?
So there may be a combination. I can speak to both of them simultaneously. There's a paragraph on item number 2, page 10. It talks about the district-wide, the total water distribution system production for water year 2019 is 222 acre-feet less than the production reported for water year 2018. And then on page 22, it states that the total water production increased by 1,028 acre-feet in water year 2019 compared to water year 2018. So I was a little confused to see both of those there. So could I get some clarity on that?
Dave, did you hear our questions?
Yes, I did. I'm trying to find the location. Could you, on page 22, where's the location?
It's in the middle paragraph.
Oh, increased by, right, okay. I don't know.
I can
John,
answer.
Lear, are you here?
Yeah, I can answer this if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
This is John Lear. There is a difference between it's how this is permitted. So if it's a water distribution system, it's counted and we're tallying everything that's been permitted as a water distribution system. And those rules have changed over time. And that's different than the amalgamation of everybody and their private well system. And so it was tracking of the permitted and the water distribution systems primarily because those at some point in time in our regulations have had limits set on them based on where they're producing out of the water resource system.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then the last question I had on page 23 at the middle of the paragraph, it states 1997 was the last time the production limits were adjusted. That seems like it's been a long time, and there are a lot of changes that have happened in there. Top of the paragraph, it says the CalAm production limit of 17,641 acre-feet that was established with the adoption of Ordinance 87, 1997. So I was wondering if it's worth bringing this back for a revisit at some point in the future.
Dave, could you answer that for us? Could we bring that back?
Well, yeah, and even though the production limit, so to speak, hasn't been adjusted since that high number, we now do all of the annual and quarterly forecasting against the regulatorily instituted production limits. So I think it's probably inaccurate to say this way. We have adjusted the production limits, but that high number that you cited was done by the district through a process of determining how much water could be withdrawn from the water resource system. Now that we've gotten both an adjudication on the groundwater basin and the CDO and the orders on the surface water, we actually have gone to those limits as opposed to a district determined production limit. So I think there's an exercise in rhetoric or writing that could be done as we carry these reports further into the future.
Okay, Dave, what committee would that go to?
Probably water supply.
Okay, schedule it for the agenda, someday.
All right, thank you for explaining that, Dave. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm feeling, so we had Director Hoffman being able to view the meeting and seemingly, a button press away from participating in the meeting. I dropped him from my call and I'm not sure where he is right now, but it seems to me that he has not found his way into the meeting.
Well, let him keep trying. I had to keep trying.
Yeah.
Okay, next item.
We didn't take a vote on those two items.
Sorry for rushing it.
That's right. I'll make a motion to, I think it's to approve those two items, number 2 and 3.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Motion made by Director Evans. A second, I think I heard Director Potter back there trying to get it in.
Yeah, I was trying, but if somebody else wants a second, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, well, I'll go with the vice chair. He tried to get it in, so roll call vote, please.
Director Edwards? Director Byrne?
Yes.
Director Riley?
Yes.
Director Evans?
Yes.
Director Adams?
Yes.
Director Potter?
Aye.
And Director Hoffman is unavailable, correct?
Apparently.
Okay. Approved 6-0 with Hoffman absent.
Okay, 6-0. Thank you. Next item. Next item, General Manager's report.
Yes, before we get into the status report, I did want to highlight a few things. Last week, we mourned the passing of Bill Gianelli. Not only was he a Lion of California Water, he was Monterey Peninsula Water Management District's first board chair. And for those of you who have driven over the Pacheco Pass and past San Luis Dam, the Gianelli power plant is named after Bill Gianelli. He's been a long-term resident of the peninsula, and certainly we in the water world will miss him. I also wanted to point out a few things that happened last week that while we're all away from our offices, the Monterey One Water released the final supplemental environmental impact report related to Pure Water Monterey expansion backup project. The Laguna Seca moratorium proposal was subject to an agreement where there will be no moratorium in Hidden Hills, Bishop, and Ryan Ranch systems if accepted by the Public Utilities Commission. We discussed Measure J activities with the eminent domain attorneys, or I did on Thursday, with some data requests and with the consultants working on operations plans earlier in the week. Suffice to say, there's been some discussion about the timing and schedule. We are seeing that the two critical paths right now are the LAFCO process and the environmental work, the CEQA process. So you may recall that the board at the March meeting adopted a more robust form of CEQA work that we thought would withstand legal challenge better, which ultimately would save more time trying to remain out of the courts, but it added time to the process. So best case we're looking at right now would be a CEQA document on final circulation in September, towards the beginning of October. LAFCO, we met with staff and their executive director over a month ago, and they also expressed concerns about their process meeting up with a September action by our board. So we're going to monitor those and try to keep things moving as fast as we can. While some of the other consultants have lost a little bit of productivity due to the COVID shelter in place, they're not the critical path right now, and we still expect their work by late June. That's the current operating assumption. The district released its notice of preparation for the CEQA work on the acquisition and boundary adjustment, and that scoping meeting is happening tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock, and it's through a teleconference that will be operated by our consultant, Rincon. And then finally, the district's remote activities, there's still a lot of folks telecommuting, but our field staff is out in the field. the Aquifer Storage and Recovery project, as well as Sleepy Hollow project, both currently being managed and crews are in place. And we're still putting water into the ground through Aquifer Storage and Recovery. And the rest of your staff and some of the directors have had several meetings using WebEx, Zoom, and Teams. This one's going pretty well right now, but not as best as we had hoped. And we'll continue to get better at the running of these kind of meetings. So the business of the district continues despite the fact that we seldom have more than 4 or 5 people in the building at any one time. And with that, I will go to the PowerPoint on the general manager's report. Arlene, I'm going to have you take control of the screen and flip the slides for me.
Right. Okay, let's go. Okay, I will get to yours just a moment, Dave.
Hey.
Excellent. I'm sorry, this should be coming up. Let's come on. There it is. It's right here. All right, Dave, there's your PowerPoint.
Great. And I just saw Director Hoffman. So he's in the building. I don't see him on the participants list. Okay, next slide, please. This is the people versus production for the water resource system.
Excuse me, Dave?
Yep.
Hold on one second. Arlene, can you mute all participants except for Dave, please?
Yes, we can. Sarah, could you do that from your screen?
No, I'm not able to, Arlene.
Okay, I'm going to move just a moment, all right? And we'll get back to your PowerPoint, Dave, in just a moment.
That's fine.
Participants. Mute all, but I will make Dave available. I think, looks like, okay. Now I'm going to unmute you, Dave. And I'll get back to your PowerPoint.
Okay, terrific. And if anybody can work with Director Hoffman on text, he's able to see some things, but he doesn't see himself on the participants list. And we just saw him on the, or I just saw him on the screen, so.
Dave, the name that's coming up under his picture is Windows.
Ah.
Okay, we can change that. Shall I change that after, when you're done with your presentation, Dave? I'll change it to Dr. Hoffman.
Yeah, and it might mean that he's seeing some of this, so. Okay, so briefly, you can see on this chart that actual is exceeding target, but only by 79 acre-feet. And recall that we're having a relatively productive aquifer storage and recovery year and table 13 water rights year. So if actual has exceeded what was programmed into those target numbers, then you're likely to see this. Next slide. This kind of underscores what I just mentioned. Table 13 is, go back, please. Table 13 is 32 acre-feet higher than it was at the end of last month. And Sand City Diesel had a very productive month, about 27 acre-feet higher than where it was at the end of last month. Next slide. So this is a half a year of production for customer service, or proxy for demand. Last month, we were 117 over last year. And this month, we're 153 over last year. And what that tells us is during the course of the month of shelter in place, as you know, or may not recall, but residential use in the CalAm system here in the Peninsula is about 66–67% of all water use. So as residents spend more time in their homes washing hands quite a bit more, you would expect residential use to go up, except for many people who both live and work within the service area. It wouldn't change things that much other than greater opportunity to do laundry and or hand washing and things like that. So we're going to continue to monitor it. Obviously, hotel stay overnights are completely gone. Restaurants are almost completely gone. And so the commercial sector is offsetting some of the residential sector. So we'll continue to monitor it. 153 acre feet isn't that much to be concerned about at this point in time. Next slide. So won't call it a March miracle, but you can see the blue bar for March, actual precipitation exceeded the long-term average precipitation. We got almost 4 inches in March. So that brings the total to 15.42 inches for the year, which is 82% of long-term average. With what happened in the first couple of weeks of April, if there was no more rain for the remainder of the water year, we would end up in a below normal category, not dry or critically dry. Next slide. And I mentioned April. You can see the red line is the cumulative line. The last blue bars were the first week of April where we got significant showers. And that's about 1/3 of an inch. And that brings us up into that total range of over 16 inches. Next slide. On an unimpaired streamflow basis, while we underperformed in January, February, and March, the April rains will actually stamp out some of the attenuation and will likely result in possibly a good May, certainly a decent April. So stream flows are 54% of long-term average, but its total of 28,300 is already above the break point. So we would end up in below normal even without the April numbers. So it may be hard to get to normal on stream flow, but that's what we typically look at to determine if we're heading into drought. 2 years of dry or critically dry in a row, we would declare it to be a drought condition here locally. It does not look like we're heading into a single year of dry or critically dry, even though we had 2 full months with no precipitation. Next slide. This is where I want to commend both the CalAm operators, of course, but certainly John Lear and Tom Lindberg, who have been out in the field, keeping ASR going, checking the regulatory framework to see if we can continue to go. And the way we left things at the end of March, which you can kind of see that little 6-day gap in between the yellow bars, that was the end of March. We said, oh, look, we're going to end up stuck at just under or right at 600 acre feet for the whole year. And then with what's happened in April, they've been out running it, keeping it going. We've got a few more days of injection likely left. And we're on the path. That blue line is cumulative. Looks like it'll probably reach 800 acre feet for the season. So that April surprise was really helpful compared to how we thought we ended March. And that concludes the compliance report. And any questions if you have them? And you probably have to unmute.
Thank you.
Any board questions?
Okay.
Do we have any board questions for the GM on the report?
I do not have any.
No questions? We'll move on. We'll move on to the director's report, including AB 1, 2, 3, 4, reports on trips, conferences, attendance, and meetings. Do we have any? Nothing from the board, just some quick ones. Yes?
They should be able to unmute themselves if they have a comment to make.
Okay, I hope they heard you. Okay, some quick things. I'd like to thank the GM for the about our first chair. We're going to try to get a donation out to his Water Education Foundation. He was one of the founders of that, from the board and the public for the district. And I want to thank the general manager for talking about the iPads. Any board members need an iPad, please contact the general manager so we can all get on the same board. He's been working on it. And Arlene, could you tell us how many participants we have in this meeting?
We have 55.
55. That's a good number. Thank you. Public hearings. Will you tell us what the first public hearing is?
The first public hearing is to consider the first reading of Ordinance 185, amending District Rule 24 to allow special fixture unit accounting for second bathrooms in existing dwelling units and to permanently adopt sub-metering requirements and exemptions for accessory dwelling units.
Thank you. General Manager, who's going to give the report?
Will be presenting.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is the first reading of Ordinance 185. It amends District Rule 24 to allow for special fixture unit accounting for second bathrooms in existing dwelling units, and it also permanently would adopt our sub-metering requirements that were adopted last summer with an urgency ordinance.
Okay.
And just as a little bit of background, the second bathroom addition, which was adopted to facilitate a second full bathroom in an existing single-family residence that has less than 2 bathrooms, was adopted that does not require a debit to an allocation, entitlement, or a credit to add the second bathroom. The protocol was predicated on the CEQA finding that the second bathroom does not increase water use. And in fact, in the adoption of ordinance number 98 in 2001, one of the findings is that the addition of a second bathroom to an existing residence is primarily for the purpose of convenience. And so in preparing this ordinance for your consideration, we are continuing with that same finding, that adding a second bathroom in a residence that was constructed prior to the adoption of this protocol does not increase water use. This ordinance would expand the second bathroom protocol to all dwelling units that were constructed prior to 2001 that have less than 2 full bathrooms. We've limited this protocol to sites that have less than 4 dwelling units. So an apartment complex would not qualify to add second bathrooms, but a site that had 2 units or 3 units could add a second bathroom for convenience purposes. The second bathroom has to be added in a dwelling unit, such as resulting from a remodel or an addition, which would include a demolition or rebuild. In other words, it cannot be added to a separate structure on the property, but it has to actually be part of the dwelling unit that's using the protocol. So that it can't be used to install, or can't be installed to create a new accessory dwelling unit, which right now accessory dwelling units are being constructed, but it would allow where there's water in a jurisdiction's allocation or entitlement, it would allow another bathroom to be added somewhere on the site, such as in a new accessory dwelling unit. This ordinance also permanently codifies 2 of the amendments that were made by Urgency Ordinance 184 in August of last year. The ADUs that are within existing structures are exempt from the requirement to submeter, and that permanent submetering is allowed for 1 newly constructed detached ADU. And then just for your information, the submeters are meters. They're not meters by the water purveyor, but they are meters that are in the water line between the main house and the accessory dwelling unit. Inline metering is encouraged to provide accountability for individual water use. So it's not something that the water supplier is looking at and billing based on, but it's something that the property owner and their tenant could use to help determine who's using the water. This ordinance also refines the definition of dwelling unit so that it more closely matches the California Building Code. CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act review, an initial study, and a proposed negative declaration were filed with the county and circulated March 16th for a period of 20 days. No comments were received, and staff will present a negative declaration for ordinance number 185 prior to consideration of adoption next month. This evening's recommendation, the Water Demand Committee reviewed this item at its April 2nd meeting and supports the ordinance, and staff recommends that the board approve the first reading of ordinance number 185. I do want to also point out that I had a conversation this afternoon with Director Byrne, who in her capacity as both an architect and a planning commissioner made some suggestions that I will bring back for second reading, some very minor insubstantive clarifications that the second bathroom can be added in a dwelling unit as a result of an addition or a rebuild, which I mentioned in my presentation. And so there's just a couple very, very, very minor language tweaks that I will bring back for second reading, but staff recommends that the board approve the first reading this evening. And if you have any questions, I can answer those.
Okay, let's try it this way this time. Vice Chair, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions. I just want to thank Stephanie for resolving a couple of the issues that really clarifies the ordinance. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Director Rowley, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Director Evans, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Director Hoffman, do you have any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hallelujah.
And see you.
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. Director Adams, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Director Potter, do you have any questions? Director Potter, did we lose you?
He can let's see if he's muted. Check and see. Let me try unmuting him.
Am I unmuted?
I just unmuted you, yes.
I have no questions.
Thank you. Okay, no questions on that first round. Arlene, let's take it out to the public and find out how many have to comment on this item.
All right, we'll see first if anyone has raised their hand, and we'll call on them first. I see a raised hand. I'm going to unmute. This is person identifies as John. So, John, I'll unmute you and please identify yourself and present your comment.
Hi, it's John Tilley. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say that it's about time that this sort of a thing happened. It just shows that there is a great deal of pent-up demand for water in our community. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley.
All right, I'm going to check and see if there are any more raised hands. All right, I see no more raised hands, so we can ask members of the public who would like to speak. You will need to unmute your mic and state your name, and we will make a list of the persons who want to speak, and then we'll call on you to speak.
Arlene, I believe that would only involve the folks who are already accessible via computer, who would have likely raised their hands. I think we need to make the phone callers unmute for an opportunity.
All right, let me unmute them.
I'm sure I will be criticized. And guess what? You have the right to criticize me. But I don't want to hear from those people who are out there protesting with God, right?
We want to mute him.
Okay, let's see. All right. I believe that those are the only persons. No. So all the persons who have called in have been unmuted. Do you have any comments to present?
Ask them what they do their credit score and if they're talking to them. What does that tell you? Does it tell you if they're borderline?
Any comments from those who are calling in?
Yeah, but that's a cheat. That's what going right. Okay.
Okay, Arlene.
Yes.
I think it's no comment.
All right, I'm going to mute these callers.
Okay, it's back to the board. Any other
Byrne would like to make a motion to approve.
Motion by Vice Chair.
Second, by Mary Adams.
Second by Director Adams. Any comments on the second? No comments? Roll call vote, please.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Byrne,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Evans,
Aye.
Director Hoffman,
Yes.
Director Adams,
Aye.
Director Potter.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
7-0, motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda. Arlene.
Next item, it's item 9, consider adoption of 2019 MPWMD annual report.
General Manager, who's going to give the report?
I'm going to give this report. You have in front of you a 4-page annual report. The district is required by its enabling statute to produce such every year for adoption in the March timeframe. We've always kind of done March, April, and occasionally it's been May. Normally this report would go through the Public Outreach Committee first. That we were not able to do that this year because the Public Outreach Committee was the first casualty of the shelter in place, and we weren't equipped to do an electronic meeting. And so we bring it to the board as a whole here. Its authorship is a combination of every division manager as it covers his or her area of expertise. It's very consistent with the last prior 5 to 6 annual reports. I believe it's both informative and sufficient to meet the statutory need. And I urge your adoption.
Okay, let me go through it again. Terry, any questions?
I have a question.
Okay. Director Adams, was that you have a question?
Yes, it was.
Go ahead, Director Adams.
So I noted in Exhibit 9, page, I think Exhibit 9A, page 2. It says that the Los Padres Dam improvement is the management of reserve of the reservoir sediment. And I noticed that there have been a couple of major slides down on the south side of the dam, and this kind of rolls into to item number 14 as well. But I'm just wondering if we're doing anything about this.
That's a great question. Thomas, are you available? And we need to kind of break these into 3 parts. Sediment management from natural sediments flowing into a reservoir is normal course of nature. The slides can exacerbate the problem, and in fact have had impacts on the outflow. There's different forms of outflow at the dam, but has from time to time clogged an easy outflow pipe. And then the third would be sometimes the slides in and around that area may not really have any effect on sedimentation so much, but it sure makes running a truck or maintenance problematic. And so we've had all 3, or obviously we have all 3. Thomas, I don't know if you're available to add anything to it.
Yeah, I'm here. I think you covered it well. I mean, the big problem recently with the slide on the cliff where the road used to be is that is just, Cal-Am, it's my understanding, is looking at how to address that, but it's such a significant problem. There's no easy fix. It's not like you could put in a wall to retain it. It's the whole hillside, which is almost vertical already, is collapsing in. So they lost the road. I heard that there were concerns about access to behind the reservoir because it used to be a trailhead, that they would maybe try to put in a trail that goes up and over the slide. But what Cal-Am is trying to do is the slide is impacting the outlet pipe, which is at underwater, it's at 980, and it's what feeds the river and the fish trap. And they need to do a retrofit on that. And what they're going to do is they're going to actually raise that pipe up and put a screen around it because it keeps getting buried, partially buried, and they have to send their divers down there to kind of pull the sediments away. And when the reservoir is really deep and spilling now, the divers can only be down for about 45 minutes to do work. So it's not like they can just pull up with heavy equipment and then muck out the pipe. So they're going to build a screen and extend it up. And they're going to try, I believe, to do some of that work in the late fall when the reservoir is at its lowest elevation so that the divers can work safer. It'd be safer for them to do their work.
Thank you. I'll have another follow-up question when we get to item 14, but thank you very much for that explanation.
Okay.
Thank you, Director Adams. Any more questions? Director Hoffman, do you have any questions? Director Evans, do you have any questions?
No questions.
No questions.
And none from Director Rowley?
I have a suggestion, but it'll come when we make a motion.
Okay. Director Hoffman, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay, Director Potter, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Thank you. All right, Arlene, let's take it out to the public.
All right, I will check to see if anyone raised their hands. If you cannot raise your hand, unmute your mic and state your name, but I will look first for any raised hands. I see 2 raised hands, so we'll start there. I see Chair Edwards, I see someone identified as JCB Arch. I'm going to unmute.
All right, they have 3 minutes. Make a comment.
I'm a director. That's not a comment from the public.
Thank you.
Director?
So I will.
And I don't know why it's a raised hand.
All right, I will go on to, I see John, and so I will unmute your mic, John.
No comment.
All right, let's continue. I see a raised hand, Walt Notley. Would you like to, I will unmute you, Mr. Notley.
Well,
You are unmuted.
okay. I just want to speak. It's going to be later. I may have clicked on too early. I want to speak on the SEIR later.
All right, sir.
Do I speak now or do I wait till later for the public comment?
You wait till we cover that item.
Okay.
And, all right. Thank you for raising your hand, sir.
Okay.
All right. Now is if anyone would like to present a comment, but you cannot raise your hand, just unmute your mic and present your name, please. Call-in user 27. Did you have a comment? All right, I will mute other call-in users in case they do have a comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any comments?
I don't think we have any comments.
I see no comments.
Okay, back to the board. Any motions?
Comment by the board, George.
Yes, from the board, or motion?
I'd like to point out 2 items in the annual report. One, it's a question to Dave. On page 1, under the integrated management program, I noticed in an earlier report on today's agenda, there were 10 new members added to the team that develops the integrated regional water management plan. I would like.
Oh. I'm sorry, I accidentally muted you, George. So Director Riley, so please repeat your last sentence.
And you need to mute call-in user 25.
So my question, Dave, is that in an earlier report in today's agenda on the integrated water management plan, there was a reference to 10 new members being added on this cycle. 10 new members of the team that developed the plan. I would like to see a reference in the annual report that 10 new members were added a year.
Okay, understood.
Okay, second point, page 4 of the annual report.
And I do think that that appears in the mitigation report. I think there was some question whether it was actually 10 or 9, and we'll go back and count them.
Or 8 or 7, it doesn't matter. Just it grew. That was my point, that more people got involved this time around than before. And that's a good statement about the district, a good statement about the planning process. My second comment is on page 4 of the annual report. It's page 90, but it's the very last paragraph, very last section on the future capital projects. It says that the desal facility is expected, the word expected, by 2023. I wonder if the word expected could be stricken and the word planned be included, because plans are one thing, expected is a more emotional comment. That's just a question about accuracy. Anyway, that's my suggestions for the 2 of those small changes to the annual report.
Okay, any other questions? Any other board members? How about a motion?
I'll move approval of the annual report with 2 minor edits.
Okay.
Second. Director Byrne.
Thank you. Director Rowley did the motion. Vice Chair did the second. Any comments on the second? Discussion? No discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Director Edwards,
Approval?
Director Byrne,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Evans,
Aye.
Director Hoffman,
Yes.
Director Adams,
Aye.
and Director Potter.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
7-0. Thank you. Arlene, what is we in the action item? What's the first one? Number 10.
To consider an amendment to contract with Pueblo Water Resources to comply with Regional Water Quality Control Board direction to move ASR to the state's general waiver.
Okay, General Manager, who's going to give this report?
This would be Mr. Lear.
Okay, now I'm unmuted so you can hear what I say. Good evening, Chair and members of the board. We are going to, whoops, that's action item 14. We'll do this one. Okay. This is action item 10, to consider a contract amendment with Pueblo Water Resources to complete the report preparation component of the application for the district to enroll itself and its Cardinal River Aquifer and Storage and Recovery Project into State Board Order 2012-010 DWQ. So to give you guys a little history of how we got here is the district, since the New Los Padres Dam was not approved by public votes, the district has been going down roads of trying to establish other water supply projects. The ASR project is one of them. It has a long history since 1996, but the way the project is configured right now began in 2001. It began in 2001 when the district received the plot of land that is now the Santa Margarita facility from the Army, and the district drilled its first aquifer storage and recovery well, ASR1, in 2001, and the Santa Margarita testing program began. At that point in time, district staff was working with the Regional Water Quality Control Board as their regulator out of the San Luis Obispo office, specifically with one regulator named Matthew Keeling. He had chose to regulate the district under what's known as Section 13267 of the Water Code, which is requires a submittal of annual technical reports to summarize the operations and monitoring of the data from the pilot study. And so the district has been preparing these reports annually, and these are the reports that you guys see annually generated by Pueblo Water Resources. And it is a compliance point at the regional board that these reports are created. Then in 2007, the district expanded its ASR program with drilling ASR2 and moving into testing. And the regulator chose to keep the district and the program underneath the code section 13267. But then alongside that, at the state level, the ASR waiver was signed in 2012, and that waiver is specifically for aquifer storage and recovery projects that are injecting treated drinking water. So it was a way to bring all of these permits into one waiver and regulate them all similarly. At that time, the regulator at the local level at the San Luis Obispo office said that we have already established a protocol and we already have a reporting method in place, and we would continue to operate that way, and rather than enroll into the board order. So the district received a letter from that regulator stating that. And then the district moved on to expand to the Seaside Middle School site in 2013 by drilling ASR3, and then in 2014, ASR4 followed. But then just recently in 2020, the regulator that we have been working with for the 20 years of the ASR project has been promoted, moved on, and the new regulator said that this is a square peg in a round hole, and has asked the district to enroll its project into the general waiver. And so we're making an effort to move in that direction. So what that actually means is we got on the phone and exchanged a few emails to understand what that meant for us. And the application process requires a $2,500 application fee and a number of technical documents. The most weighty of them is a technical report summarizing all the project operations and exactly the effects. We also have to submit excerpts from our EIR. We have to submit excerpts from the national document as well. And then the waiver itself has an annual fee of $2,500 for each year the project is operational, to which the section under the water code we were operating before did not have that. So working with our consultants, Pueblo Water Resources, MPWMD staff, with them developed a scope and a budget that is filing of these applications and creating of these technical reports. Pueblo Water Resources has just 2 months ago finished this process for the city of Santa Cruz, working with this exact same regulator. So we have a pretty strong understanding of what is going to be required of us. And so the scope that was in the staff note is reflective of that. And I did want to note that the $20,114 does include a contingency in that total. So it would be a not to exceed that with the contingency in the contract amendment. And so this has been through both water supply planning and advisory committee, and both of them recommended moving it on to the full board. And so the staff recommendation would be that the board of directors authorize the general manager to amend the Pueblo Water Resources contract that we have for support of ASR operations for water year 2020, and in the amount of $20,000, $114, to complete the technical reporting and submit the application to the Regional Water Quality Control Board to enroll the Carmel River ASR project in the general waiver. And just a small note too is this $20,000 114 does not include the application fee. So we will not be passing that through Pueblo and having it marked up. We will be submitting that ourselves. So with that, I can pass it back to you, Dave.
Yeah, and I think that's sufficient. What we're asking is just approval, recognizing that the one-time upfront cost of the technical reporting is off our budget, and the annual submittals will be part of operating expenses through the ratepayers.
All righty.
Question?
Yes, Director Ralph.
Can you repeat those numbers again? It's $20,000 to do the work in order to file a permit, but the permit itself also is a $20,000 expense. How frequent is the fee, the permit fee?
There's a one-time application fee of $2,500, and then every year following will be an operational fee of $2,500. So the contract amendment for the $20,114 would be to pay for a work product from Pueblo that is the technical reports that are submitted with the application. So the $20,000 would be a one-time fee, and it would be a $2,500 fee every operational year of ASR. So if we did get a year where it didn't rain and we didn't operate, we wouldn't pay that fee.
Thank you for clarifying the numbers.
Okay. Any other questions? Director Evans, do you have any questions?
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Director Hoffman, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have a question. My question is, what is the difference between how we were operating through the regional board before and how is it changed now going through this, in quote, waiver?
Right. It will change our reporting frequency. We were under the water code where we were being regulated before. We were only required to do annual reporting in July. There will be a quarterly reporting. There will be an annual reporting component to it. There is also a volumetric component to this that we weren't reporting to the regional board before. There was a volumetric component of what was injected, but there was not a volumetric component of when it was extracted. So we will have to modify our databases and our queries, but the main effect of staff time would be the more frequent quarterly reporting, but that should be somewhat minimal. It does give us an opportunity to revisit the analyte list that we're sampling for and try to might refine that. The actual the water quality sampling that moving from how we're being regulated now to what we will be regulated under the general waiver will be less frequent and less stringent. So there may be a cost component there with a reduction in laboratory fees, but that's all part of the application process that we'll know once our application has been accepted.
So, John, I guess what occurs to me is that this would be an annual cost to the district to have the consultant prepare the reporting, but are you saying that that would be handled by the district and that with the consultants, 20,000 is to cover is some initial aspect of this?
That's right. Yeah, Director Hoffman. So the just over 20,000 is for the initial application into the program, and then the annual 2,500 is all there is required. And the reporting template and everything will be set up for us, and we'll do that under our own budgetary authority. So the 2,500 will be reimbursed as a O&M expense. The cost of annual reporting does not require that same $20,000 report each year, but it is going to require some staff time.
Any other questions, Director Hoffman? No more questions? Arlene, let's take it out to the public.
All right. I'm looking now if anyone wants to raise their hand. I'm checking for any raised hands. All right, I have one. John, please state your name.
No, Arlene, I'm sorry. Once again, I am not raising my hand. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. Mr. Notley, did you want to speak on item 10?
Which is the SEIR.
No,
Okay, we'll wait.
it's not. So this is, I'll move on. All right. Now, if anyone would like to speak and you do not want to raise your hand, you can unmute your microphone. If you're participating by computer and you want to speak, you can unmute your microphone and state your name.
Move to phones.
All right. We'll unmute those who are participating by phone.
You should sell that shit, start over. It doesn't matter. You know, whatever. Anyway, you might be able to take all the fucking. If you get a nice house, you can take the shovel board kit and the hockey table from my house.
All right. I'm going to mute the.
I can't live with that stuff. You go out social.
All right. No comments. I'm going to mute these callers.
Okay. Thank you, Arlene. Back to the board.
Welcome.
Do we have a motion on this or discussion?
Director Byrne, motion to approve.
Vice Chair approval?
Director Evans will second.
Okay, we got a first from Director Vice Chair and a second by Director Evans. Roll call vote, please.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Byrne,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Evans,
Aye.
Director Hoffman,
Yeah.
Director Adams,
Aye.
and Director Potter.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, 7-0. Arlene, what's the next item on the agenda, please?
It is item 7 to considering entering into a reimbursement agreement with California American Water and act as lead CEQA agency for construction of a bypass pipeline to allow simultaneous pure water Monterey recovery and ASR injection. Is there a staff PowerPoint for this?
Yes, and I believe it's item 11. Just that I may have misheard.
I'm sorry if I misspoke.
Okay, General Manager, who's going to give the report?
This is also John Lear. And John, you're muted.
Thank you. I was getting it set up. I think I'm ready. Okay, Chair, members of the board, this is action item number 11. The item is to consider entering into a reimbursement agreement with California American Water, and we would be incurring the cost because we would be acting as the lead CEQA agency, and we would be doing the CEQA work to construct a bypass pipeline to allow for simultaneous pure water Monterey recovery and ASR injection. During the quarterly water budget process, which we bring to the district for approval every quarter, we realized that there was a need for about 1.3 miles of pipeline. The functionality of this pipeline would be allow for simultaneous pure water Monterey recovery and ASR injection moving forward for water year 2021. This was realized because as we shift production from the Carmel River Basin to the groundwater basin, there are more months of the year, mainly in late spring into early summer, that the production will need to come out of the Seaside Basin in order to recover all the pure water Monterey. And at that point in time, you may actually be within the flow triggers of the in-stream flow requirements for our permits to divert water. And at that point in time, there was identified about 1.3 miles of pipeline to which during those months you would want to have water moving both directions, which is not possible. So you would need to make a prioritized decision over which of the water resources projects that you were going to be operating at that time. In effect, you are deciding between beginning to recover pure water Monterey or continuing to inject ASR. Both of them have outcomes that are not desirable if you choose one over the other. If you choose to stop injecting ASR, you will be letting water run out into the ocean that you could have saved and used for later. However, if you choose to keep injecting ASR and not to recover pure water Monterey, you will be writing down your effective diversion limit upon injection of pure water Monterey and not taking advantage of recovering the water, thus exceeding this cease and desist order limits on the river in jeopardy. So there was lots of questions of where this pipeline was during going through the committees. And so what we've done is we've created some slides here that will show you where it is and why it's necessary and what functionality we get out of constructing this pipeline. So what we have here is water moving from, on the yellow line from Crest, coming down over the hill and moving along General Jim Moore and moving towards ASR 3 and 4 where they could be injected. And then we have the blue line, which is pure water Monterey being recovered out of ASR 1 and 2, thus wanting to move water from north to south and over to Forest Lakes Reservoir in these months that we've identified that we would want to be operating both water resources projects. So this is exactly where the pipeline would be in the ground. But what we want to understand is these diagrams show water on the left-hand side coming from Crest, and then right next to that we have water coming from Forest Lakes. And these are the existing infrastructure we have in the ground on the top of the three of these diagrams. And we have going north is right in the page. So ASR 1 and 2 are south of ASR 3 and 4. So when we're injecting currently with the way that the pipelines are set up, we are having water come as a source from Crest and as a source from Forest Lakes, enter into the pipeline in General Jim Moore, and then go towards injecting of ASR 1 and 2, go north, go into the configuration of pipes that lead to ASR 3 and 4, and then swing back around in what's called a recirculation line, and then go to the Hillby million-gallon tank to feed the demand in the Seaside system. So that's when we're actively injecting. Then when we move into storage, we move into where we're not pulling water out of any of these wells. However, we're utilizing what's called this recirculation line. It's the point between ASR 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, where we have two pipes in parallel, well, we can bring water from south to north and then swing it around and bring it back and then enter Seaside, thus keeping the pipes disinfected and water moving through them at all times. This was identified about 5 years ago and constructed because previously the water would go dead in this component of the line, and we would have to recharge it, repressurize it, and rechlorinate it each time we wanted to go and change states. So this was a functionality that we built in to save that, and to save if flow in that pipeline had gone to zero and the chlorine residual had dropped to nothing, we would have to dump that water to the pit, which was also a waste of water. Then we move down into the bottom diagram on this of the three, and we can see recovery mode. So in this diagram, what we're doing is we're moving water out of the ASR wells through the pipeline in General Jim Moore, and we're moving it into Seaside, and we're able to move it over to Forest Lakes as well, going through the transfer pipeline, or the Monterey pipeline.
Back to that email that had the link in it for me for a sec.
So what we wanted to see is, what is the proposed pipeline? And there was a question that said,
it's got the agenda.
Why was this proposed pipeline not identified as needed when the water supply project was built, if it's needed now to operate ASR and Pure Water Monterey simultaneously? And the answer to that is there would be an additional well set, ASR 5 and 6, that are at the northmost side of this page constructed. And the descent water from it would be coming from north to south.
How can I get two windows so I can have that in one instead of... Shit, what did I just click it off again?
I think Melanie Christoph needs to be...
Please mute yourself. We can hear. Someone needs to be muting their microphone.
Yeah, it's Melanie.
I'm sorry. Excuse me, John, for interrupting you.
That's okay. Okay, I'll give it a try. We'll start with the top one again. If the desal plant and the Monterey Peninsula supply, the way it was designed was to bring water from north to south, which is desalinated water. So this is a situation where we're in the winter time and we would be injecting into the ASR wells, and we would be bringing water from the desal plant from north to south. And the envision was that the water is in the upper diagram is traced red, is desalinated water, and it would be moving down and going and being injected in ASR 5 and 6 and 3 and 4, and the desalinated water would be able to make its way into the Hilby million-gallon tank and supply the city of Seaside their water supply. So this would be the reduced rate that this desal plant would be running at, and would be the sources that would be consuming that water, which would be ASR 3 through 6 and the city of Seaside demand. And water would be moving from Forest Lakes tank and from Crest from the river and being injected in ASR 1 and 2. It's always been understood that if this is a configuration at this design, that molecularly water that is going down 3 and 4 would be desalinated water, but it would be counted as water that had been diverted from the river, because the water that had been diverted from the river would be consumed by demand other in the system. And this was always known and has been vetted as far as the Monterey Peninsula water supply works. So if we can move down to the second diagram of the three in the middle, you can see that this diagram has a pipe that's pink or fuchsia. That's the component of the pipe that we're talking about building, and it's in the southern section, and it is a pipeline that runs from the backside of the Monterey pipeline at Hilby and hooks to the other side of the pipeline that goes to the million-gallon tank of the General Jim Moore line. So in 2021, when we want to recover Pure Water Monterey water, we will be able to recover Pure Water Monterey water out of ASR 1 and 2, move it into the existing General Jim Moore pipeline, and move it over to the Monterey pipeline and off to Forest Lakes to meet the demand on the peninsula. At the same time, we will be able to move water down from Crest through the new pipeline and then back on the other side of the General Jim Moore pipeline that's being used to move water from ASR 1 and 2 and get that water to the city of Seaside and ASR 3 and 4 for injection. So we would be effectively using one well couplet, ASR 1 and 2, to recover pure water Monterey, and ASR 3 and 4 would still be available to inject water into the Carmel River. And then I want to move down to the third diagram, which shows us this is a component of Pure Water Monterey expansion ASR, because it was always envisioned for this project in the design that this extra pipeline would be needed for Pure Water Monterey expansion, because it allows for bringing of water from the north side, from the Pure Water Monterey expansion recovery well field, down through the General Jim Moore pipeline and over to Forest Lakes, while simultaneously bringing water down from Crest and having that water be able to reach ASR 1 through 4, as well as the city of Seaside. So it was always envisioned as being needed for Pure Water Monterey expansion. So how we got to the place we're at is CalAm and the district staff, we kind of realized this when we were planning. And then CalAm approached the district and asked if we would act as the lead CEQA agency for the construction of this pipeline. And a lot of this work, some of it has been looked at with the Pure Water Monterey expansion, and this would just be an additional work to get that up to the level that it could be constructed in an accelerated way. And so Denise Duffy and Associates were the consultants that had done that work for Pure Water Monterey expansion. And so they gave us a quote, scope and budget for not to exceed $28,567 to bring the CEQA work up to where it could be used to construct this pipeline, moving quickly towards this fall, so it is available for water year 2021. So if the board chooses that this is a path to move forward on, the staff would recommend that the board of directors authorize the general manager to enter into a reimbursement agreement with CalAm and then complete the CEQA work with Denise Duffy to construct the bypass pipeline that's necessary to allow simultaneous Pure Water Monterey recovery and ASR injection. So with that, I will give it back to you, Dave.
That was terrific. I think you addressed some questions that people are likely to have. So I guess we'll just take it from there.
Okay, Dave, is it anyone from CalAm like to speak on that since they're the applicant?
Yeah, we do have several members who are familiar with the project. I believe I saw Tim O'Halloran and Ian Crooks online.
Do they want to speak?
Yeah, hi, this is Ian Crooks with CalAm. I was prepared to speak, but I will second that John did a terrific job on the presentation and the slides and explanation. I don't think at this time I can add much more that John did not already cover. I'll be here for any questions though.
Okay, thank you.
This is Director Byrne.
Go ahead.
Does CalAm reimburse us for this?
Correct.
Yes.
Any other board questions?
Director Hoffman has a couple of questions. One is just, it's my understanding that Crest Tank is a secondary method of bringing water from the Carmel River to ASR, but the primary method is to go to the Forest Lake tanks. And it just seems to me kind of odd that with all the work CalAm was doing to install a new pipeline going up Hillby, that this wasn't addressed sooner.
Is that a question for MPWMD or CalAm?
Whoever has the knowledge to answer, it just seems to me that this could have been dealt with, or again, my comment is regarding that the Crest tank, as I understand it, is not the primary method of bringing water over from the Carmel River to ASR?
I can speak to before the Monterey pipeline was constructed, it was absolutely the only way water got from the valley to the well field. And that had problems that we had low pressure. The Monterey pipeline was designed to be a transfer pipeline and to have a pump to hold pressure in the General Jim Moore line. This year, when we were putting in, if you say we're putting in 3,000 gallons a minute, this year operationally about 1,500 has been coming both directions. But that's I can speak to what is current operations and past operations. I was not totally involved in the planning process for that, but that's what's happening in the field today.
Yeah, it just seems to me that I'm just at a loss to understand why the new pipeline from the Forest Lakes tanks to uphill across Highway 68 and so forth wasn't designed to address this from a science standpoint.
This is Ian from KLM. We're in a different situation today, and that's why we investigated this. We began with initial investigations around the Pure Water Monterey expansion. When that came on board, and then through further discussions and technical evaluation with John and a few sessions we had, we also identified that right now with desal delays, it is an important parallel pipeline to have with the current Pure Water Monterey phase. With desal, the scenario is a totally different situation. There's ample supply. John had mentioned that you can, during those transition periods, you can inject desal water. You have desal water to support the system during peak summer. We're in a different situation, and that's the need for the pipeline. That is, I think the key part is the transition phase from injection to extraction, that we need to have extraction of Pure Water Monterey water going on during the transition from injection season to extraction. You may need to wait 45 to 60 days for that transition to occur on the ASR wells, and that is in peak demand time. So it's just not something we can afford to do. So the drivers for the pipeline today are different than the original project, with just desal as a large part of the supply. So it's somewhat of a different scenario that we're looking at.
So I'm sorry, you were kind of cutting in and out, but for me anyway. So am I correct in, if I understood what you were saying, is that the need for this pipeline is associated with a delay of the desal plant, and that otherwise it wouldn't be necessary?
Yeah, what I'm saying is, yes, that is part of the evaluation and criteria, a driver for this. If you had desal and it was, in terms of coming on board and visible, that it was happening soon, then we envisioned desal would have the ability and ample supply to we would not need this separate pipeline.
And just my last question, if I may, and I know this is for doing the CEQA work, but do you have some sense of the cost of doing the constructing this project, design, construction?
Yes. Again, I think I mentioned it on our in the last meeting, admin call, but we thought all in, we're looking at about a $5.5 to maybe $6.5 million project. We will be going out to competitive bid environment to seek construction costs for the project, and then of course bring it forward to the actual governance committee over the water supply project. So it would be at a public meeting. We'll discuss all the actual facts around the costs and the bids that come in. But that's our kind of range of where we think things might be. We also have to look at what may be paving requirements that may be imposed upon us that we're not anticipating. But knowing the costs that we've installed other pipelines, like the recently installed Monterey pipeline, that's somewhere in the ballpark of what we're looking at.
Hey, to revisit.
You were cutting out. You said 6+ million. I'm sorry. You were kind of cutting out.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I think it's anywhere from 5.5 to 6.5. That's all in cost.
Thank you. That's all I had, Chair.
Thank you.
I'd like to revisit your first question, Director Hoffman. Ian, when you said with desal, you would have more than enough ample supply to meet demand, would that also mean that you would de-emphasize the injection of ASR so that you wouldn't really be maximizing ASR in that situation?
Yeah, well, with Dave, I think what John alluded to earlier was you get into talking about molecules.
Yeah.
At that point, and then you're just, why you're trying to shove molecules all the way across over the hill, down the valley, just to put it down the hole while you have desal coming by. And that we envision that there would be some ability to do the proper accounting with it.
Yeah, so okay, I got you. So you extract from the river, use it to meet current demand, you inject desal into 3 and 4 and call it river water.
That's right.
Just as long as it doesn't exceed your withdrawals from the river. Yeah, gotcha.
And then we have the meters down on 68 and General Jim Moore where we would know how much is available that is excess, I think.
Yep. Thank you.
Director Evans, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. I do not have any questions.
Hey, Director Rowley, do you have any questions?
Chair, I would like to thank John for that excellent presentation. It was very, very clear, and I appreciate the time and effort he put into helping us out with that.
Yes, I have a few questions.
Go ahead, Director Rowley.
I'm concerned about, well, I'm curious about how does this cost get into rates? Is this a advice letter, or does this go back to the PUC in any application?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes, Director Riley. We would, once the project is complete and used and useful, we would seek recovery of the cost for the project through the CPUC. What procedure or what method to seek that recovery is to be determined, but certainly we would seek to recover the cost of the project.
My understanding of the project is that a little bit off of Gary's questions about the timing. If we're looking at a period of time when we don't have desal, then we're really looking at how we maximize ASR and access to Monterey 1 water at the same time, because they're coming from different directions, opposite directions. If it's a timing question, well, I'm curious about the timing of getting approval into rates, because this does not go forward until PUC acts. Is that correct?
The pipeline, the
This
project.
1.3 mile pipeline, yes.
Well, no, we would. Our approach would be just like other parts of the project. For instance, the Carmel Valley Pump Station that we're currently starting construction on, the Ryan Ranch interconnects in Hidden Hills. That's a separate, actually different under the PUC proceedings. But like the Carmel Valley Pump Station is part of the water supply project, and we're constructing that project. So we see it as a component of the overall Peninsula's water supply solution, and therefore we would look to continue to do the work under that project budget, and then when a facility's used and useful, then seek the proper means to recover the cost for the PUC.
Well, this is still going forward with these additional pieces of the project after the CPCN has been issued, because we do have the Carmel Valley Pump Station as an additional component. We have the pipeline in the general rate case. That's an additional component. And now we have this pipeline as an additional component. I'm just concerned about how the costs of all these pieces get added on top of the CPCN decision. And it just bothers me that these additions were not part of the original design and approval and the full picture that was presented at the PUC in one time. I don't need a response to that, but I do have a specific question about this actual pipeline. I understand that it goes up General Jim Moore, going north or whatever, between Hilby and the Wellfield. It goes through the construction of General Jim Moore. What's the possibility of it going, I don't know, 100 feet to the east and go through the sand piles that are adjacent to the road and would be less expensive? Is that an option? Could the CEQA look at that as an option? Is it an option at all? It would be a cost issue in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't, it can be looked at, of course. I don't know the details that close, but there's all sorts of issues outside the roadway in General Jim Moore. To the south are power lines. We did look at that, where we could put it through that area where power lines are, and that was really not authorized. That was not found to be a feasible solution. Then on the north side, you have more issues with munitions and other elements related to the old, contaminated soils and other things up on the pavement. So as far as I know, inside the pavement or in the roadway was the safest, cleanest way to construct the pipeline.
My question. My question is about the cost again, and the timing of this. If it's going to take some time to get the project approved in general, if it's going to take some time to get some permits, I don't buy the ammunition argument, because adjacent to General Jim Moore was so close to residential areas in general anyway. I'm doubting that there's much ammunition threats in the dirt there. But anyway, I'm just curious about, will the CEQA process consider a different location of this pipeline going forward? I hope it does, but I don't know what's in the CEQA requirements for an alternative.
I think it's a great question. I think we take that up with Denise Duffy, and I think we can have them put that under consideration.
Yeah, this is Dave. I can't underscore enough the difficulty with moving it to that location is very real in terms of the, it's not just the munitions, but it's the process. And you basically have easy access to easements within the roadway. Trying to develop an easement in the sand, in the dune sands, with the kind of threefold layer of munitions work and also the demise of Fora probably would add a couple, if not 3 years to the process.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Not saying it's not a logical question to ask. It very much is. When you look at it, you'd think it'd be less intrusive and cheaper.
Hey, Director Adams, do you have any questions?
I do not. I am just feeling not dissimilar to the way George feels about a lot of this, but I don't have any specific questions. Thank you.
All right. Director Potter, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good. I appreciate the discussion, but no, I don't have any questions right now.
Okay, this is the chair. Just a couple of questions from me. Is that pipeline going to be big enough to carry water to future and 3 and 4? Is it going to be that big?
This is Ian from Kellam again. Yes, sir.
Okay, now suppose, hypothetically, I know it's hard, you do a smaller desal and the expansion of pure water be added on. Is that pipeline going to be big enough for it?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I asked for that in writing. Well, I guess we'll get it. To Mr. Laredo. Mr. Laredo?
Yes, sir.
Do we have any problem with this in what we're doing with Measure J and any being lead agency?
No, you do not. Those are two separate spinning wheels.
All right, thank you. No more questions. Arlene, we can take it out to the public.
All right, I will check again for raised hands first. If anyone wants to comment and can raise their hand, we will check. Okay, I see none. If anyone would like to speak, they can unmute their mic and please state your name. All right, I will go to the phone in. So I got past it. Okay. Now I'm going to unmute the phone in users. If you have any comments to make, please state your name. All right, I hear no comments, so I am going to mute these phone-in users. And there are no public comments, Chair Edwards.
Thank you, Arlene. Okay, back to the board. Do we have any motions, discussion? To the board, any motions?
I'll make a motion. This is Director Byrne.
Okay, Vice Chair.
I'd make a motion to approve. And this is based on the fact that we wouldn't have needed this if the desal alone was being used. But this is to accommodate what we're looking at, which is ASR and Pure Water Monterey. So I think this is, the circumstances changed and the pipeline is essentially required by these two projects.
And Potter will second.
Okay, Vice Chair did the motion, Potter second. Any comments more on the second?
No, I think it's time we move forward. I think we had a lot of discussion about this. I think this is an appropriate motion on the part of this. I'm glad to see we got. Yeah.
Okay. For the question.
Whoever's the server, mute their phone.
Calling for the motion. We call for the motion. Roll call vote, please.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Byrne,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Evans,
Aye.
Director Hoffman,
Gary.
Director Hoffman, Director Adams,
Yes.
Director Potter.
Aye.
I'll try Hoffman one more time. Director Hoffman. Okay, approved 6-0 with Hoffman absent.
Okay. Vote approved 6-0. Arlene, what's next on the agenda?
Item 12, consider adoption of the 2020 Legislative Advocacy Plan.
General Manager? Who's
Yes, so this item is contained as Exhibit 12A to the packet. Normally, we've adopted it on consent, and the purpose, of course, is for the rest of the board to see what the Legislative Advocacy Committee has embraced for the coming year. But moving it to action here gave us the additional chance to direct your attention to an informational report, item 19, which is the Sacramento bill tracking list. We also have one for the federal government. And through the course of the year at our Legislative Advocacy Committee meetings, we will maintain a focus on certain bills. And you can see in that list the ones that were identified by the committee at its March 24th meeting as watch, support, or oppose. So that's something to direct your attention to. Did, however, want you to see the plan. For the last 3 to 4 years, it's been heavily focused on Pure Water Monterey, the first phase, finding some federal monies for that. We did, in fact, succeed with the Bureau of Reclamation's Title 16 program WIN Act grant that Monterey One Water is now doing the administrative work to receive. This legislative plan does shift just a little bit to focus a little more on fisheries and watersheds, both at the federal and the state level. So basically, you can see by reading it that we have a federal strategy, a state strategy, and a local strategy, and what the major topics for the year are. I did want to point out that under the state of California strategy, item 3, the second bullet point, I inadvertently left in there focus on SB 669 as an alternative to the water tax. Towards the end of last year, the water tax was eliminated or subsumed by a different approach with a continuing appropriation from the cap and trade monies. So we'll take that one sentence fragment out, but we are focused on the proposed State Water Board permanent conservation regulations as a result of 2 bills that got passed and approved last year. But this is just an opportunity for you all to see what that committee has recommended for the district's calendar year 2020 approach.
Mr. Chair, if I might. Hello.
Director Edwards, Director Potter's asking for.
I just thought as an opportunity to speak as the chair. I think we all realized that going back to DC, we realized the value of the Ferguson group when we were back there as far as being able to create that DC profile that we wanted, as far as making sure that issues that we cared about at the federal agenda and also grant opportunities were realized. And then also the ability to maintain our presence at the state level through JEA and Associates has been helpful. Our Sacramento profile helps us articulate our issues better, I think. And also that we've been able to develop, through Aqua, our relationship with the water reuse groups. But one of the things I think that I'd like to see us continue to emphasize is, and I know, Mary, I think you're very fond of this project too, is the Carmel River Free project, which is the rebuilding of the lagoon habitat at the mouth. And that is one of the final items that's, I think it's bullet point 3, participate in countywide efforts and Carmel River Lagoon for flood mitigation and abilities to not have to do the barrier wall around the lagoon, and actually to see the river just return to its natural breaching and flood control program it had, or protocol, or whatever it was that it had back there when it ran on its own before we built those houses down in the Hatton Fields area. I think that's something that is of value if we can continue to pay attention to that. So I just want to add my enthusiastic support for this agenda that's before us tonight.
Thank you, Director Potter. I have trouble with my mute and this and that. Okay, Director Hoffman, are you back? Director Hoffman, are you back? Okay, any other directors with any questions? Director Raleigh, do you have anything?
No, no questions.
Okay, Director Evans, do you have anything?
No questions, thank you.
Vice Chair, do you have anything?
No, no questions.
Okay, Director Adams, do you have anything?
Questions?
Okay, thank you. Let's take it out to the public, please, Arlene.
All right, if anyone wants to comment and they can raise their hand, please do so. I am going to check for any raised hands. All right, I see no raised hands. If anyone would like to speak, who is participating in the, either on their computer, you can unmute your mic, make a comment. Please state your name. All right, I'm going to unmute the persons who are participating by phone.
I'd move approval then of the ledge agenda.
Okay, we're still in public comment.
Okay, this will just take a moment. All right, are there any comments from the persons participating by phone? I hear no comments, Chair Edwards.
All right, thank you.
I'll then try to again approve the ledge agenda.
Okay.
And I'll second that.
Okay, first from Director Potter, second by Director Evans. Director Hoffman, are you back? Okay, roll call, please.
Director Edwards?
Yes.
Director Brown?
Yes.
Director Riley?
Yes.
Director Evans?
Aye.
Director Adams?
Yes.
Director Potter?
Aye.
Director Hoffman?
So here's a note on Director Hoffman. We see him as a participant, but he says he's been disconnected. So he's either lost voice contact or all contact, even though we see him in the participants list.
Okay. All right.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, thank you. 6-0. Arlene, item
Yes.
13, please.
Item 13, consider letter of support for certification of supplemental environmental impact report for Pure Water Monterey expansion backup project.
Yes, thank you. This is a recommended action item subject to discussion and agreement among the directors. A week from tonight, Monterey One Water has the opportunity to actually do 4 different things. They have a public hearing to consider certification of the final SEIR, the adoption of CEQA findings and a statement of overriding considerations, approval of the mitigation plan, and approval of the proposed modifications with conditions, which would in effect empower that board to choose when and if to advance the project to project level. Obviously, the simple certification of an EIR doesn't ensure that a project gets built. The letter was drafted basically with the district suggesting encouragement for approval and certification. And reasons are primarily that when we got into this, there was greater uncertainty, far greater uncertainty. The 2 requests to the Supreme Court were still pending. There were many permit issues that were unresolved, and having a backup plan seemed like the highest order of need. And we agreed to fund collectively $1 million worth of work to, in effect, qualify the project, at least on an environmental basis, within a year. Basically successful, this document would have been ready for certification in February. The comment period was extended. It is ready to go. It does meet the 4 corners of what a supplemental EIR should be. And because of our investment and our expectation that if it was executed correctly, then it should be executed fully. The second issue is what I alluded to earlier, that it would be great to have a shovel-ready product, if not for a backup to the desal. Obviously, there's going to be need from other water agencies, or perhaps at some point in the longer-term future, the local Peninsula water agencies. And then third and final, as you can see in the letter, is simply that there are many pertinent facilities in there that are needed for optimizing Cal-Am's system and Cal-Am's operations with or without expansion of Pure Water Monterey. So that's what's in the letter. Certainly would take any modifications based on your discussion.
I'm gonna leave this thing on. Sorry, Molly. Hey, any questions from the board? Any questions from the board on this item?
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Okay, well, you want to say your comment now, or you want to hold it until the next round after we get to the public?
I have some comments too, which I'll add when it comes back to the board.
Okay, no questions? We didn't pick up the Director Hoffman anymore?
We're talking on the side. We can't figure out if he's been disconnected.
I think I'm back.
Yep, there you are. Very good.
Okay, do you have any questions?
No, I have comments that I'll reserve for our comments from members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there's no board questions at this time. Arlene, could you please open it up to the public?
Yes, I will. I will first look for participants who have raised their hands to make comment. So I see Anna Thompson. I will unmute your mic.
Yeah, 3 minutes, Ms. Thompson.
You okay now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Anna Thompson Carmel. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to this board of directors, chair, and general manager for all your efforts to develop and successfully implement the Pure Water Monterey project, and also for securing the SEIR for the expansion of the Pure Water Monterey project. Since the SEIR has addressed all environmental concerns and meets all CEQA guidelines, I now urge you to send a letter of support for certification of the SEIR as having satisfactorily addressed the original objectives established for the report. There is no justification to block the certification. I believe that given the current uncertain times, it will be reassuring to know that we have a backup plan in place should the need arise to expand the Pure Water Monterey system. Thank you so much for your consideration, and I appreciate all your time you're spending here tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm looking for other raised hands. I see right here. Oh, no. All right. I see a raised hand, Teresa Kohler.
All right.
Please present your comment.
You need to re-unmute her.
Ms.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Patrice Kohler from East Garrison, and I encourage you to send a letter to the Monterey 1 Water Board ahead of its April 27th meeting that the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Board encourages the M1 Water Board to certify the final supplemental EIR for the Public Water Monterey Expansion Project. The SEIR is an environmental document. On its scientific merits, it deserves public funds and resources have been utilized to research and develop it. Very concrete and specific feedback has been provided in the form of master responses to those persons and entities who submitted comments during the public comment period, which ended January 31st. It is clear that the prudent and responsible path is for the M1 Water to certify the SEIR for the quote backup plan should it be needed in the future. Thank you for all your work on this, and
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Now, I would ask that any person, yes?
Melody Chrislock, I can't raise my hand, but I just unmuted myself for a comment. Is that okay?
Yes, and then I will take some, well, it's up. I see a couple of other, another raised hand. Chair Edwards, would you like to take Ms. Chrislock's comment? And then I'll move on to the other raised hand.
That sounds good to me, Arlen. Go ahead.
All right. Melody Chrislock, Public Water Now. I would absolutely hope that after all the work that and the money that has gone into this from the Water Management District, that you would write this letter and send it post haste. There's no reason this shouldn't be certified, and I urge you to do so. I've never seen so much effort go into crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's that Paul Sciutto has done to make this work for everyone. So please ask them to certify it. Insist that they certify it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I have Amy. I'm going to unmute Amy. Please identify yourself.
This is Amy Anderson from Carmen. And, woo,
Oh, so hang on, Amy, you're either entered into the meeting twice,
could be.
or you have your phone and your computer speakers operating at the same time.
No, I don't have the phone, but how do I get out the second? You know.
Arlene, can you go to the second Amy and?
I'm just doing it.
Oh, there you go.
Myself out. Okay.
Very good.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I did learn one interesting thing about being sheltering in place and online meetings is you could actually cook a whole dinner and eat it and still listen to everything and be back for the action. So, yes, I'm calling about to recommend that you do send this letter of support. It's a lot of money that has been spent and a lot of time by these two public agencies. It's an incredible, the capacity of Monterey One Water is incredible. And I would say that it should be done now when all the T's have been crossed and all the I's dotted for the SEIR, because it's also, as of January 2019, it's a priority for the state of California to identify and reuse single-use water rather than dumping it in the ocean or an estuary. And we have the opportunity right now, because of this is done, to encourage your partners in this project to accept this. And then in some time in the future, if we need it, we certainly will have other wastewater that we could clean up. It's, it's kind of like money in the bank. So I think it's very important that you urge the Monterey One Water Board to accept it. And thank you for a very interesting meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes. Are there any other comments? Just unmute your microphone.
Arlene, I think this is where the speaker named Walt Notley wanted to speak. I don't know if he's still there. I wanted to ensure he would know.
All right, I will unmute him and ask him if he wants to comment. Would that be appropriate, or?
Sure.
What?
Yeah, go ahead. He's still on there.
Yes, he is. Mr. Notley, did you want to comment?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, thank you.
All right, good, yeah, thank you. I'm Walt Notley, Monterey Peninsula ratepayer. And here's my comment here. $1 million of taxpayers' money plus $350,000 of CalAm ratepayers' money has been spent on the supplemental environmental impact report for the Pure Water Monterey expansion project. As much as possible, all environmental monitoring and reporting problems have been thoroughly addressed. It would be a missed opportunity and a waste of residents' money to block certification of the SEIR. The Monterey One Water Board's Resolution 2019-19 states the expansion is a backup plan in the event that CalAm's desalination project is delayed or never built. CalAm's permit to the California Coastal Commission last November 2019 lists several problems that would more than likely delay the project for many years. But Monterey Peninsula Water Management District staff, board, and area residents and businesses will all benefit with more assured access to needed water. So I encourage you to submit your letter to the Monterey One board members to certify the SEIR. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Are Are there any other comments?
Yes.
Oh,
I think this is Mr. Raphael.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir, make your comment.
Should I read my letter? Should I get in on the conversation?
Rafael Ramos.
Should I read my letter?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Just a minute.
Rafael Ramos, Monterey. I urge you to send your proposed letter to the Monterey 1 Water Board, urging them to certify the supplemental EIR water project expansion. The supplemental environmental EIR completes the analysis of the environmental impacts of the expansion. It would be illegal for the Monterey 1 Water Board to deny certification on political grounds or in consideration of the private interests of any party, including any private party, including Cal-Am. The Monterey 1 Water Board would have to answer to the Fair Political Practices Commission if it acted on any other grounds than the facts set forth in the supplemental EIR. Remind the Monterey 1 Water Board that certifying the SEIR does not approve the project. Approval of the expansion requires an affirmative vote of their board. Also, Cal-Am must agree to purchase and reject the recycled water from Pure Water Monterey. Urge the Monterey 1 Water Board not to tarry until an emergency arises, as happened in the current pandemic situation. Tell the Monterey 1 Water Board not to be accused of letting an emergency happen. Ask for that board to go forward with the good work it has done so far with Pure Water Monterey. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Arlene, anyone else?
all right, does anyone else want to speak?
Yes, I'd like to.
Go ahead, John.
Please present your name and your comment.
Hi, thank you. It's John Tilley, the Coalition of Peninsula Businesses, co-chair. And I'd like to just say that taking public comment right now from the Public Water Now crowd is a little bit difficult for me. Knowing that they're going to act as interveners and raise such a fuss that they're not being paid for their efforts really makes it difficult to take them serious, and actually seems very odd and almost borderline unethical to me. If their passions are so deep and they care so much about protecting people from expenditures, then why are they asking to be paid for their efforts? So I would just encourage the Public Water Now crowd and some of its former members to really back away from some of the rhetoric, and certainly to back away from the idea that they should be compensated for their efforts. Thank you very much.
All right. Are there any other comments? All you need to do is unmute your microphone if you want to make a comment. I'm going to unmute these callers. I believe this.
All right. Well, hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Yes. All right. Are there any other, does anyone else want to speak who has called in?
Yes, phone. Can I talk?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Oh, good. Is this me? Tammy Jennings. I would just urge you to please send a letter to approve the SEIR. I think it's important and needs to be done. And I'm kind of confused about the last comment about Pure Water Monterey people being reimbursed or compensated? I don't understand that. But anyway, please send the letter to Monterey One Water and ask them to certify the EIR, the supplemental EIR. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Arlene, there's one more caller that you did not unmute. Calling user 5.
All right, does anyone else want to speak? I see caller 13.
Should I call it and make it
All right, are there any other comments? Please state your name. Okay. I see and hear no other comments.
Okay, thank you, Arlene. Back to the board for comment. We could start with Director Hoffman. Before I lose you.
Yeah, I actually have thoroughly read both the draft and the final EIRs, and I have serious concerns that the consultants' responses to the comments and issues raised by the Water Board, the Monterey County Water Resources Agency, and the City of Salinas are not supported by facts. The consultants' responses appear to me to be incomplete and rely on unsupported assumptions and opinions. Additionally, I don't believe that the documents adequately address the anticipated impacts from climate change to our region. They assume that historical climate patterns in the region will continue in the future, as well as water usage as it relates to municipal water, agricultural wash water, glyco drain, etc., without any evaluation of the validity of those assumptions. So I don't believe that the document is adequate. I think that Monterey One Water should require that additional work be done on the document so that those issues raised by those agencies and the issues related to climate change can be thoroughly and fully investigated. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Potter, do you have any comments?
No, I don't. Thank you. I'm in favor of sending it.
Okay, Director Adams, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to comment on this. I think this is one of the most important votes that we're going to be making. And that has a whole lot to do with the water future of our area. I am supportive of this project for a lot of different reasons. I'm supportive of it because I do believe that we are paying attention to climate change, and we are looking now, as Amy Anderson said earlier, the comment that we must use every drop. And I hope that this project and our that we are able to continue with it, we support that approach. Not only that it is more cost effective, I think it's also prudent. Not only the way the county is approaching the work that we're doing on the COVID-19 issue, we're going over and above so that we can be prudent and not cut short. I think that this is a very similar sort of approach. We do not know whether the desal plant is going to happen, whether it will be delayed, whether it will be ready by the cease and desist order deadline of December 31, 2021. So it's simply prudent for us to move forward with this and be able to have a source that we can rely on. And additionally, I want to say that I am very happy to report that I know that the Monterey County Water Resources Agency is working with Monterey One Water to work out the operational questions that they have had. I believe very strongly that they're going to come to an agreement that we'll need to wait to see what their response is to the project. But I'm very happy to say that they are working together to come up with a plan that will satisfy the concerns that they have expressed in the past. So I'm very strongly supportive of sending the letter. I think it is the right board to do, and I hope I will support the board moving forward with it.
Thank you, Director Adams. Director Evans, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Chair. I do. I just want to say that we took on this initiative a year ago, a little more than a year ago, with Monterey One Water to do what was in the best interests of the community. And I think that we need to see that through. Whether or not it is built, it is important to at least finish this. If this document has been fully vetted, it's been through comment, it's been through a review, and there's no reason on environmental grounds back, then I would encourage Monterey One Water to certify it. And I think our letter in support of that is very important to send. So I would be in support of this.
Thank you. Director Raleigh, do you have any comments?
Yes, please. I think we have a timing problem with the near future as opposed to the long range future. And the COVID-19 has kind of driven home a new kind of sense of priority for me. If there's going to be a recovery, and I'm sure there will be, we need maximum flexibility going forward. I think the business community needs that maximum flexibility as well. I mean, and I'm really focused on the business community. The only way to get maximum flexibility is to have a water supply in the near term, not in the long term. So to the extent that Pure Water Monterey expansion and its SEIR sets the stage, or at least has a shovel-ready project ready to go, it can cut the time required for getting a water supply that's guaranteed and assured and gets delivered to the Monterey Peninsula. The reason I go to the COVID-19 point is that the business community has been very active in supporting a project that gets them their maximum bounce back opportunities. Even though Dave Stoltz's demand report suggests that there may be much cushion in the existing structure of water supply that can cover the bounce back, we've got a new bounce back issue facing us. And the only way we can get the maximum flexibility is to have a water supply sooner rather than later. So it's a no-brainer to me to support the SEIR and try to encourage at least it's shovel ready and can be moved quickly if needed. So I'm in a mindset that suggests we should be ready to act quickly. That's my reason, and I'm a yes.
Vice Chair, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. I do have some concerns that the surrounding agencies are satisfied with the EIR. I also think that we have supported this project with Monterey One Water, and I do support the letter going out, but I would want the EIR to address the concerns of the surrounding agencies.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Laredo, are you on? Mr. Laredo, are you on?
Yes, I am, sir. I was on mute.
Okay. A couple of questions for you from me. Okay, did you read the EIR?
Yes, I did.
Okay. We got a portion in there talking about water demand, and it went through the board, not for a final approval, but it went through the committee. Is everything okay with that? I don't want them coming back and say we didn't approve our water supply, water demand report, and the board hasn't seen it. Would that affect anything to do with them disapproving this?
I can't speak as to why they may or may not approve it, but that's not a requirement. The consultant has an independent obligation to identify the appropriate demand factors based upon the best credible evidence. It's not a political decision. It's not a policy decision. It's a fact upon which the EIR needs to be based, and the consultant wrote that based upon the facts that the consultant determined to be sufficient.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make that motion, Chair. This is Director Evans. I'll move approval of the letter as written and send as soon as possible.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion. Okay, roll call vote. Roll call vote, Arlene.
Sarah?
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Burns,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Evans,
Aye.
Director Hoffman,
No.
Director Adams. Aye. Director Potter.
Aye.
Motion passed 6-1.
Motion passed 6-1. Thank you all. Next item, Arlene, please.
Item 14, consider written response to state
Yes.
regarding water right 20808 A, B, and C.
And I'll try to shorten this a little bit. John has a presentation. But this is very consistent with the first action item, where that was the Regional Water Quality Control Board informed us that their platform had changed. And this is now the State Water Resources Control Board, in effect saying the same thing with respect to our water rights on the Carmel River for Los Padres Dam and ASR. So John, why don't you go ahead? Let's try to be as quick as possible.
Okay. Originally, we had got the district had applied for and been given the right to try to perfect a water right of 24,000 acre feet to impound water behind the New Los Padres Dam. When the New Los Padres Dam was voted down by a public vote, the district went forward, as you said, Dave, with the ASR projects. There were a component split off for each of the two ASR projects. One, 2808A, is permitted with the Santa Margarita facility, and 2808C is permitted with the Seaside Middle School facility. 2808B is the remainder right. We received a letter from the State Board on March 4th, telling us that by December 1, 2020, the period to demonstrate beneficial use and in fact to construct the new Los Padres Dam was going to elapse. And at that point, the district and the water right will be held to the maximum amount of water that had ever been diverted in the history of that water right, and that value was 0. So in effect, with no action of addressing this, the water right would go to 0 on December 1st. On 3/24/20, district staff and the state board got together and talked, and we also informed them that 2808A and C, they were aware, but we talked about the fact that 2808A and C also have the same licensing period to which you must show beneficial use under, to which we have shown beneficial use under these two water rights. However, we've not shown the full face value of the water rights. And so, in effect, our water rights will be capped at the maximum amount of water that we've ever diverted under those water rights. Unless we were able to present the state board staff with a pertinent argument, would allow them to make a finding that would allow them to increase the right above what we had ever been able to do historically. And that finding would be something like the days of diversion are limited to days that fall within permitted flows on the river. So therefore, the maximum the water right that we would be able to get is on a 12-year return interval for the climate we're experiencing now. So do you want us to do a petition for extension of time in order to demonstrate that, or can we make a finding and move forward with licensing? They recommended move forward with licensing, try to work to make that finding. If they did, and if they could not make that finding, at that point in time, we could file for extension. So there may be a shorter path to licensing. And the reason to license a water right is to perfect the water right, and then it's permanently yours and can never be reduced, rather than a right that has not been perfected. So that's A and C. Then we move to 2808B, that we have a petition for extension of time, but it's actually a petition for extension of time for a delayed dam. And the New Los Padres Dam is on a permanent delay. And so it is their advice to switch our petition for extension of time to build New Los Padres Dam to petition to extension of time to show beneficial use under this water right. And then at a time that other projects were identified, we would file a second petition, which is a petition for change. And then that would reopen any type of comment period and any period for people to file objections and get involved into the negotiating process. Any of these items will also open a 30-day window to have those happen. And so we presented this to both, only to the Water Supply Committee, and it recommended moving it to the board for general comment. And if it is the will of the board, we would move back, and the regional board has asked for a response from the district in writing within 45. Thank you. The state board has asked us for a response in writing by 45 days from the receipt of the letter. So we would bring this to the board to seek a recommendation for a path forward.
Any more questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Number one, John, thank you so much for making this so clear. You really do have to, demystify it, and I thank you very much for that. But here's a question that is maybe terribly naive, but I'm just curious, again, going back to the slides that we were talking about and the silting up of the Los Padres Dam, could that have an impact on the amount of water rights that we would have if that continues? Even if there were just another one or two between now and the deadline that we have for continuing?
I think that if it's okay with General Manager, I could ask to get past this question to Mr. Laredo.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me just add my 2 cents worth on the way. The rights for the water behind the dam currently are CalAm's rights, and they have been diminished once before for siltation behind the dam. And there's been some additional siltation, and if you had another major slide, certainly the existing right for the water behind the dam, which is part of the legal rights that the company has off the river, the 3376 acre feet per year that we're trying to get to. In our case, it would only happen if one of the proposed future beneficial uses included something on Los Padres Dam. Because right now we are taking our diversions from a different location than the Los Padres Dam. Right now our portfolio of ideas includes additional aquifer storage and recovery in Seaside Basin, potential aquifer storage and recovery in the Tularcitos aquifer, a possible well or wells down near the cod plant to augment the Pebble Beach reclamation plant to produce more water for irrigation, potential for wheeling of water from the Carmel River during times of high flow to another water agency outside the area. And then finally, if the Los Padres Dam's alternatives analysis indicates either retaining the dam or even augmenting the dam, then that potential beneficial use would come into play with our water right. But as of right now, it wouldn't really have that much impact unless they decided to true up a water right based on the existing siltation, and that would fall more on Cal-Am at this point. But
if
Loretta
I
can correct me.
if I could layer on that, Los Padres has an existing water right, an existing permit. Cal-Am owns that. That is not the base for this water right. This water right is a theoretic water right that relates to the new Los Padres Dam, and that was never built. And what we have been doing is breaking off pieces of that new Los Padres Dam water right, which was a storage right, and we're converting it to a diversion right. And the fact that the diversion could be at the Los Padres Dam or not, this is based upon a different water right, and that it's held by the district. So what Dave said is correct, that the siltation or the desilting of Los Padres Dam, or indeed the existence or non-existence of that dam, does not play into our conversion of the new Los Padres water right and converting it from a storage right to a diversion right. Those are two separate sources of water supply and water rights.
Thank you so much. Thanks. That's just great. Thank you.
Any other board questions?
I have a question, please.
Okay, go ahead, Director Riley.
How the state has suggested these actions, but I wasn't clear what the impact of the actions were. Is this a one-time request for an extension or an establishment of a position that lasts for 5 years, 10 years, 1 year?
Right.
What happens with the decision that this board makes?
Yeah, so circuitous path, but if you take, for example, the county has the 11043 water right for withdrawals from the Salinas River that have never been perfected. Several years ago, probably 4 or so years ago, the state informed them that that water right was coming up for expiration and you hadn't created any beneficial use, and it might be time to have a revocation hearing. And it was negotiated between county and County Water Resources Agency and the state to get a deferral. There was like a haircut that was taken on the water right. This is not dissimilar. The staffer at the state, in effect, said, hey, look at this stack of 700 petitions that remain outstanding, have never been closed out. 2 of those petitions were an application to build the Los Padres Dam, the new Los Padres Dam. And so we had received deferments based on the desire to continue to build the Los Padres Dam. And then the other was deferral for beneficial use. And as John pointed out, water rights A and C had already been broken off and assigned to aquifer storage and recovery. So the time was right to license those anyway. 2020 was our date. So in a harmonic convergence, the date 2020 arrived at the same time a staffer arrived and looked at the stack in his inbox and said, you know, we need to clear these things out. And so we knew that we had to do something about it. Director Burns been beating that drum for 2 years, I think. And so the timing is such that we have to act because they want us to act. It's not a real threatening fashion, but they do have the option of just simply revoking the right, or as John said, if we do nothing, driving it to 0. And it represents, I think, still about 18,000 acre feet, somewhere between 16 and 18,000. And not all of it's necessarily usable in the long run, but we would be giving up an asset to just let it expire. So the actions that we want to take are in response to them going through their files, but we knew it was inevitable that we had to come up with a plan.
Director Byrne.
Is there a time frame about what we respond to and then what they're likely to do in the future?
Yeah, I think John touched on that. The conversation that our staff had with them said, hey, look, we do need a response to our letter within 45 days, maybe 45 days of when the timestamp one arrived at ours rather than the email one. They'll turn that around. I don't think we have a guarantee as to when they'll turn it around, but hopefully by the end of the calendar year, they would in fact notify us on the path for licensing A and C and the path for extending the timeline on B. I don't know, John, do you have anything to add on the timeline?
Yeah, they said that if we get, they want to know our plan in 45 days, and then because if we got a petition in because they had not decided what to do with the petition, and that you reach that date, that would in fact stop the any actions that would be taken by the elapsing of that period. And then I'll just add that the remainder of the right is 18,600 acre feet, and the in talking to them about the path forward for finding separate projects, approval of a petition for change, it has a high likelihood for this water right because it would involve a reduction of the water right, because any project you would identify, there's not a high probability that it would use that much water, and this water right is junior to other people's water rights, so it would not have effect on downstream users. So they said that was in our favor as well.
Well, I'd like to see us exercise maximum flexibility so that we have as many doors open to us in the future and not cut any of them, not shut any of them. That's all.
This is Director Byrne, and actually I have been on this probably for almost 9 years, and this has been sort of lagging along for years, and I think we're up against the deadline. And we need to probably pursue what the State Water Resources Board has laid out, because we certainly don't want to lose the water.
Okay, any other comments? Director
Comments or questions?
Well, questions.
Thank you. I don't have a question.
Okay, Director Hoffman, do you have anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, Arlene, let's take it out to the public, please.
All right, I'm looking for raised hands. Anna Thompson, I see your hand is raised. Did you want to speak on this item?
There. Sorry.
All right, thank you. I'm going down the list. Mr. Tilley, your hand is raised. Did you want to speak on this item?
No, thank you.
All right. Okay, would anyone like, if there's anyone who would like to speak, you can unmute your microphone and please state your name. I hear no comments. I'm going to unmute the persons who called in. Are there any persons who called in who would like to present comments? Ms. Kohler, did you want to present a comment? All right, I see no comments, Chair Edwards.
Thank you, Arlene. Back to the board. We have any motions, comments you'd like to make on this item?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommended approach.
Motion to approve.
And I'd second that. If I could speak on the second, I'd appreciate it.
Go ahead, Director Potter.
So I was around when the 11043 water rights were taken back by the state, and they said, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. I'd be worried about the same thing happening, exactly the same thing with our rights on the Los Padres. This is not a referendum, again, about the dam itself, but a possibility to the suite of alternatives that David laid out at the start of this discussion. Those alternatives are all viable, and I think that's where we need to put our efforts. And I'm glad to see we're going to be able to move forward and go ahead and have those discussions about what is the more contemporary way to create water, to save water, to use water in this area. And I think we've been on the forefront of that in the district. I mean, honestly, if you look at what we've got going on in the district, as far as whether it's reclamation projects with ASR, whether it's desal, we've got existing desal projects in Sand City. We've been leading the state in conservation. And so I think we should get credit and go ahead and move this thing forward with the water rights. I'd hate to lose those rights to the water that we have in the river. So for that reason, I'm very supportive of the motion.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Byrne,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Evans,
Aye.
Director Hoffman,
Yes.
Director Adams,
Yes.
Director Potter.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you. I think item 15 was pulled, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, we won't discuss it, or it's off the end. Last, any information, staff reports? Okay, y'all gave me a good birthday present. So today is my birthday, and I'm glad I got
Okay, all together now. Happy
birthday to you. Happy birthday
to you.
Hey, Alvin.
Happy birthday, dear Alvin.
Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, y'all gave me a good present with number 13.
Alvin, one of the toughest meetings I've ever seen a man run. You did a good job. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and before everyone signs off, yes, we had some hiccups at first, but we did hit a pace where it was going very, very well, and I think this can work. I will tell you that probably half the problem at the front end was caused by a change in the meeting number, number one, and that's my fault because of some changes we made in the account. And number two, we're going to have to continue to get better at letting you find a link, a button to press, at least for most of the directors and staff, rather than having you enter passwords and missing a case sensitive
oh boy,
and so forth. And so I think the next thing we'll try to do is see if we can add a button on our website that takes you straight to the link rather than, I don't know, we'll find it, but the meeting notices and things that Sarah sends out, usually if you download the whole message and read down far enough, there is a link so that you don't have to enter the meeting number and password. So we'll work on that.
And Arlene, thank you. Arlene, thank you for stepping in and kind of saying, I can do this and I can do that. You can unmute, you can mute, and you can do this and that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you all.
Well done, yeah.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
I'm going to have a party for one.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Happy birthday, Alvin.
Birthday.
Thank you.
Night. Happy birthday, Alvin.
Good night. Thank you all.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Alvin.
Thank you all. Good night.